The year 2000 was fast approaching, and a new generation of consoles was on the horizon. Nintendo had one final swan song for their aging cartridge system, the Super Famicom. Fire Emblem Thracia 776 was released on the Japan-only Nintendo-powered device. No, not the magazine we're familiar with in the US. This Nintendo Power is a special device that allows you to download games from certain stores. Think of it as an early version of today's digital distribution. Prices for games bought on this device are much cheaper than traditional carts. Fire Emblem Thracia 776 was first released on this device, and a cart version a few months later. It was one of the last Super Famicom games ever released. The gameplay of Fire Emblem Thracia 776 is a hybrid of old-style Fire Emblem, a bit of Genealogy of the Holy Wars, and brand new mechanics of its own. Still, the core design is based on Mystery of the Emblem. If you know how to play Mystery of the Emblem, then you'll be right at home with this. The stats have returned to the previous all 20 caps, but they also introduced a brand new multifunctional stat called Build, better known as Constitution to Western players. I will refer to it as Con for the rest of this retrospective. Characters with higher Con can use heavier weapons more effectively, the ability to rescue lighter allies, and capture lighter enemies as well. Unlike the later games, Con grows just like other stats. For some reason, they kept the amount of stats at 8, so they combined magic and magic defense into one stat. So for the first time in the series, more characters can naturally defend against magical attacks. You'll need it though, since magic is deadlier than ever. Let's get back to Con for a minute. The higher the Con, the less weapons will slow your characters down. But it doesn't work on spellbooks. Rescuing also relies on Con. A character with a higher Con can rescue a lighter one. The rescuee would merge with its rescuer, with the rescuer serving as the main unit. The rescuer can carry this unit around with him anywhere, and drop them off wherever and whenever you want. You can use rescue to protect a weaker unit from harm, or just move someone out of the way. The catch is that the rescuer would have all their stats, except luck, cut in half. You might have kept one unit out of harm's way, but if the rescuer is attacked, he'll be severely handicapped. The biggest thing to come from Con is the ability to capture. As long as you have a higher Con than your enemy, you can capture him. Capturing works just like regular combat, but instead of picking the attack option, you pick capture. A capture fight works exactly the same as a regular fight, except you enter this fight with all of your stats cut in half. If you reduce the enemy's HP to 0, you capture them. Unarmed enemies like healers can be captured without a fight. The same can also happen to you. Once captured, you can strip your enemy of their weapons and items. Many rare items and weapons can only be acquired through capture. Up until now, all Fire Emblem maps are beaten by killing the boss and seizing the castle. Thracia 776 brings some much needed diversity by having different victory conditions. Besides the typical seize castle, you also have escape missions, defend map for X number of turns, and Fog of War. In addition to that, there are also maps with hidden objectives that, if completed, will give you access to side chapters called guided chapters. These guided chapters offer more story, but aren't mandatory. Figuring out how to access these chapters itself is like another mission objective, and it adds to the fun. All Fire Emblems have been designed with a certain style in mind. Fire Emblem Gaiden was designed more RPG-like, Genealogy of the Holy Wars was about bloodline and massive battles. Thracia 776 is designed to test your strategic skills to the max. Many of the changes and tweaks to the formula were designed specifically around providing a greater challenge. While you can still use brute force, you also have scenarios where brute force just won't cut it. A successful strategy usually involves thinking a few steps ahead of your enemy. Thracia 776 builds on this concept further by adding something called fatigue. Everything a unit does will add 1 point to their fatigue. If a unit's fatigue is higher than their max HP, then that unit can't be used for one chapter. Any unit that sits out a chapter will recover from fatigue. There is an item that rids fatigue, but it's only sold in 2 shops. So before you even play the current chapter, you'll have to think about the next one. Do you need a powerful character for this chapter, or would you rather have him rest up for the next one? You'll either have to use your characters efficiently, or pick your characters carefully. Only the main character is immune to fatigue. If you think that's bad, you haven't seen anything yet. Besides retaining skills and the weapons triangle from the previous game, Thracia 776 also brought back a modified version of leadership. In Genealogy of the Holy Wars, you must be in range to receive this bonus, but in Thracia 776, all units benefit from leadership bonus. Multiple party members now have leadership stars, and their bonuses will stack. This is all well and good, but the CPU also gets the same advantage. The game actually turns the table on you in a chapter where a super tactician appears, making simple grunts a chore for even the most powerful characters. Situations like this can only be won with strategy. There are even situations where brute force can ruin your plans. The designers know that Fire Emblem players are generally perfectionists. They want to recruit every single character and keep them alive. So they designed one of the hardest recruitment scenarios that still haunts many today. To recruit this character, you must save his 8 subordinates. In order to save these subordinates, you must first save their family, and get them to talk to them. Sounds easy, right? Except the subordinates are grouped with enemy units that will attack anything. Their family members are defenseless civilian NPCs. Mixing the enemy units together with the subordinates in the same room means you can't stick a powerful character in there to clear out the enemies, because the subordinates will also attack you. Killing them will ruin your plans. To top it all off, this map is littered with treasures and a secret item. You can only get this secret item if you complete this map without killing a certain enemies. Just be thankful all of this isn't mandatory. Even without this side quest, the main scenario will push your skills to the max. Escape missions will come with tons of enemies, or a super enemy could appear if you don't escape within a certain number of turns. Enemies will come out in unexpected places in Fog of War. Hidden traps and enemy mages will be the bane of your existence. Like I said before, you may be able to defend against magic now, but magic's been upgraded and deadlier than ever. Dark magic can now poison you. Mages can wield infinite range staffs that can silence, sleep, or berserk your characters. Think your super powerful characters will mop up the enemies on the map? You won't be laughing when they get berserked and start attacking your own units. None of these status ailments go away on their own, save for beating the map. Staffs that cure ailments come in very limited supply and can't be bought in shops. You'll have to take full advantage of capture to loot the enemies for these elusive staffs. Oh, and I have one more bit of bad news. This is the point where they completely dropped character revival. Your only option is to reset or go on without them. If it'll make you feel any better, many of these characters have very little backstory. While lacking in detailed character development, they are much more memorable than the characters of Mystery of the Emblem. But it's a far cry compared to the cast of Genealogy of the Holy Wars. Even the scale of the story is smaller, taking place in only one area of the continent. This is understandable though, since the story takes place in between chapters 5 and 9 of the previous game. For the first time in the series, it stars a brown-haired protagonist, Prince Leaf. He's the son of Quan and Ethlin from the previous game. The story takes place in the year Grand 776, 1 year before Celus's rebellion. The basic premise of Leaf reclaiming his kingdom is very similar to Marth's story, but it has the added depth thanks to the connection to the previous game. This plugs up a plot hole too, since the entire continent save for Thracia was supposed to be under the Grand Battle Empire. How was Leaf able to maintain Lanster by the time Celus arrived? Before I start talking about Leaf's story, let's go back to Sigurd's story for a bit. During Verdan's invasion, Granbel was already at war with Isaac. Though lacking in troops, Sigurd fights back with what he has. Ethlin, being Sigurd's younger sister, and her husband, Prince Quan, being Sigurd's best friend, couldn't just let him fight alone. The two of them left Lanster, leaving most of their troops with Quan's father, the king, to defend their kingdom. They only brought along a young knight named Finn. After Sigurd was branded a traitor, Quan and Ethlin returned to Lanster to bring back reinforcements. The spoilers starts now. During the fight back to Granbel, Quan and Ethlin arrived at the Yield Desert with reinforcements hoping to rejoin Sigurd. What they didn't expect was an ambush from Thracia's Dragon Knights led by King Treban himself. Trapped in the sand with no retreat, Quan and Ethlin dies. Their daughter Athena was taken by Treban along with their family's holy weapon. With his archenemy dead, Treban sets his sights on finally conquering the entire Manster district. I highly recommend you don't watch the game's opening if you haven't beaten Chapter 5 of Genealogy of the Holy Wars, since the spoiler-heavy text is in perfect English. Thracia launches their invasion of Lanster. The king dies at the hands of a traitor, but Finn manages to escape with Prince Leif. Leif would spend most of his life in hiding, hopping from city to city until finally settling on a remote village called Fianna. After a few years of living in peace, Leif is finally discovered by the Empire and Fianna village is raided, and some of his friends captured. Leif decides it's time to stop running and fight back. Again, the story is very basic on the surface, but it has a very somber tone. Prince Leif would spend much of his childhood constantly on the run, and tragedy strikes a few more times in the main story. People are already suffering from the influence of the Loptos cult as child hunts ravage the continent. The story would eventually converge with Genealogy of the Holy Wars, ending at Chapter 8. Don't worry, even when it converges, the story is seen from a brand new and more detailed perspective. Although the name is Thracia 776, the country Thracia and King Treban only play a minor role in this story. The main villain is Lederic, a high-ranking general in the Empire. Unlike other villains, Lederic is a cowardly double-crossing scumbag with no redeeming qualities whatsoever. To get to where he is, he first betrays the King of Connaught and Lanster to Treban, then betraying Treban to the Grand Bell Empire. He's the kind of villain you'll love to hate. Being a side story to Genealogy of the Holy Wars has its pros and cons. The pros obviously being able to further develop some characters and flesh out the universe better. A person like Finn is a minor character in the grand scheme of things, but he lives to fight for both generations, allowing us to watch him grow from unassuming young knight to a battle-hardened veteran. Now we see him serve as Leif's father figure in Thracia 776. In fact, Finn has more screen time than any character in the Yundro saga. The downside is that some elements connecting to the previous game is kept vague. Fans still debate whether Ivael is really Bridget with amnesia. The story provides evidence to support and refute this theory. It's like the designers are taunting us on purpose. There are other little unsolved mysteries that will never be answered. The Fire Emblem is also missing from this game, unless you count the title screen. All in all, it's a fine ending to a fine saga. Thracia 776 would mark the last console Fire Emblem for quite a while, and would also be Fire Emblem creator Shozo Kaga's last game before leaving to form his own company. In our next episode, we'll be taking a break from the mainline games and look at how Fire Emblem silently smashed its way into the West, the departure of Shozo Kaga, and some rare Fire Emblem games on the Satella View.